Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Jeff Heilman Project. We are in the middle of July. The heat is on. It's starting to warm up here in Northern California. However, we've had a pretty mild summer so far and can't complain. The air conditioner has been on, but it hasn't been as consistent as it normally is. It's just been all around really awesome weather. You know, Jeff, I was contemplating this podcast today, and I think that what I'm feeling that is important for me, at least, to talk about, is I recently read and reread one of C.S. Lewis's novels, the last one in the Chronicles of Narnia. It's called The Last Battle. It's number 7. And as an author, his imagery and his ability for you to be able to visualize these rather exaggerated. Now, in all honesty, I have not read the Lord of the Rings. Did you ever read any of the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit or anything in school?
I did
J.R.
not have
Tolkien?
a self-image consistent with self-discipline.
Well, I just didn't know if
long
it was
enough to read The
required
Hobbit.
because you did do English, and I didn't know if it was like.
I think
sometimes
I read an abridged version of The Hobbit for about a chapter and then put it away, and I was like,
the reason why
What?
I'm saying that I can't it's because I can't compare C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia to The Hobbit because I never read The Lord of the Rings. But as what it made me think of, and I'm going to read just like a really quick, like a passage out of it.
yeah.
He's talking at this point, at this junction in his book about these. In Narnia, there's talking animals. We all know that. And these talking animals are dogs, but the dogs don't act like normal dogs. They act like people dogs, if that makes sense. And the dogs are so excited to be in Aslan's territory, in Aslan's country. So this is like heaven, right? And the dogs, he's written, what looked funniest was the dogs. During the gallop, they had not been at all out of breath, but now as they swarmed and wriggled upwards, there was plenty of spluttering and sneezing among them. That was because they would keep on barking, and every time they barked, they got their mouths and noses full of water. But before Jill had time to notice all of these things fully, she was going up to the waterfall herself. And it was the sort of thing that would have been quite impossible in our world. Even if you hadn't been drowned, you would have been smashed to pieces by the terrible weight of the water against the countless jags of rock. But in that world, you could do it. You went on up and up with all kinds of reflected lights flashing at you from the water and all manner of colored stones flashing through it, till it seemed as if you were climbing up light itself, and always higher and higher, till the sense of height would have terrified you if you could be terrified. But here it was only gloriously exciting. And then at last, one came to the lovely stretched green curve in which the water poured over the top, and found that one was out on the level river above the waterfall. And just the fact that this is one paragraph out of this book and where he's describing ascending a waterfall, whereas on Earth, you could never do that, but here it's possible. And the lights and the refracting, it made me think, and the reason why I thought we could talk about it was his ability to articulate what he could see in his mind out onto paper, that we would be able to read it and be able to see it, like Mozart's ability to articulate onto paper the music that he could hear in his head, or Picasso's ability to articulate, or Da Vinci's ability to articulate the Mona Lisa, translating it from what was birthed within him to what we see as a final copy. And it just made me think this morning, reading this passage, that it is impossible to go up a waterfall, but yet he was able to articulate it in such a way that I could feel free going up a waterfall, and that it could be possible to go up a waterfall. So I think the theme of today's podcast really is, how can we, or is there a way that we can articulate feelings, emotions, visions, the things that we've dreamed about into a real way to where other people can be moved by what we can successfully articulate.
I like that topic very much. And I have a very good personal friend of mine who's been, I think I met him in 2002 at Radix One. So coming up on 25 years now, a guy named John Asher, who's a buddy of mine, lived in South Carolina for 20 years. He had homes in New York and Pennsylvania and divested himself of those things in his mid-30s because his wife had family in South Carolina and they wanted to move south. And John and I were involved in a couple of different business ventures over the years together. And great guy. Built a very successful real estate business, has investment funds on top of that, like public funds that are available for investment by public entities. And I asked him one day because he's, I've made, not quite 10 million.
Yeah.
He's made hundreds of millions. And I asked him, I said, what do you spend most of your time doing? And he said, I don't really talk about this that much because it just seems a little woo-woo. And he's a Christian, a great brother in the Lord. And we're very clear on our thoughts of worshiping and steering clear of idol worship. But it's also very clear in the Bible that God has no problem having his people have stuff. Mm-hmm. He just doesn't want the stuff to possess us and become primary. And he said, I spend between 6 to 8 hours a day architecting my life, what I want to do. And it could be fun stuff. It could be business stuff. It could be business ventures. It could be investments. It could be boats, the color and the size and the location on the hull of the pinstriping for his sailboat that he wants and where he's going to put it. And he's not into cars as much anymore. He's traded in all the fancy cars and just drives, I think he drives a Prius or something economical because he just doesn't care about those things. But there are things that he does care about, trips that he wants to go on, houses he wants to build, businesses he wants to build with his children, those types of things. And he literally architects and thinks and dreams and schemes and plans and allocates capital and effort and energy and resources and talent and recruiting, all this stuff toward building this ideal life. And he's one of the most successful people that I know. I have another friend of mine who's been CEO of multiple companies with multiple exits, both public and private equity exits. And I asked him, I'm like, all right, so you're coming out of school. How did you get to where you are from school? And he said, basically, I knew that if I was going to have the life that I wanted, I had to be CEO by age 40. And so I worked backward from there. And I'm like, all right, I need at least 3 C-level jobs adjacent to or through acquisition into large companies. I need to work for the best people in the Valley. And he became CEO at 40, and he's done multiple exits since then. So again, we see that begin with the end in mind. If we go back to our roots and the 7 habits of highly effective people, it doesn't say focus on the goal. It says begin with the end in mind. So I think where people's focus needs to be, as I've talked about for weeks and months on this podcast, is constraint removal. Mm-hmm. But it's always constraint removal aligned to what the overall goal ought to be. And I think that's what's done the majority of the heavy lifting for Musk when I worked for him, for my friends that I've worked with as CEOs of companies, and for my entrepreneur friends that have made hundreds of millions of dollars.
I think that when you see someone like Tom Brady or Michael Jordan, or you see it in athletics, or you see the Da Vinci's of this world, and you see these people that throughout time have become, genius level, or what we would refer to as, the top of the top. It's difficult to think that they ever had moments where they probably had to crumple up a piece of paper and throw it away, or that they missed a free throw shot, or that they didn't catch the winning, touchdown, but they did. And I think that the thing that we can take from reading and seeing these perspectives is the reality that in your success of articulating what you're trying to convey, that you yourself have to be happy with the product, that you yourself need to know that you've produced the best thing that you could possibly do. The other day, you and I were having conversation with the kids about maximum, the best effort. Like, do we do everything that we can do with our best effort? It doesn't mean it's going to turn out the best, but as long as we've continued to give it our best effort, then we know that we're going to continue to produce and articulate properly what it is the message that we're trying to convey.
And I think if we go back to architecting our life and best effort combined, I think that people need to spend some time either in meditation or in dreaming or in drawing or in architecting, because incremental improvement doesn't get it done by itself. And the example that I heard was the light bulb did not come into fruition, into manifestation of a physical thing because of the endless improvement of the candle. It was a new thing.
Yeah.
It was something that Thomas Edison said, there's a new energy source different than fire that can also produce light, because prior to that, the only thing that had ever been lit up was a rainy night, got lit up for a second by a lightning bolt, and you had fire, and that was it. There was no incandescent bulb. And so you and I have been, for the last couple of years, in a period of rebirth and reimagination of what kind of life we want to live, what we want to do, who we want to be, what kinds of businesses we want to have. And I think that in that imagining and in that deep work of visualizing and dreaming, I think we really need to start with the picture of what we want our life to be like. And I think that we live in a world where most of the things that you want can be had in exchange for money, right? Love, no, right? But relationships, longevity, legacy, all those things take time to build, and they're the best things in life for free. I agree. But when you have the best things in life, you need to support them with things that cost money. And so when you have a constant demand on a family, on a business, on a community for resources, I see a 10x, 100x multiple of productivity that comes from the innovators and the people that learn how to dream of what they want and how they want to see it, and then they figure out how to get there afterwards.
I think the perfect current example of what you're talking about is we just recently watched Young Washington, and so I highly suggest anyone it's probably not going to be in the theater anymore by the time, but get it on demand and watch it. And because I had not really understood, we've done a lot of studying on Abraham Lincoln and other presidents and what they'd done to contribute, and we've known and heard the tales of George Washington and that cherry tree and the wooden teeth and everything. But I had not, until we watched the movie, had not fully grasped and understood his desire to change his station from being a tenant farmer to a gentleman to a commissioned in the royal, and his work toward architecting his life to where he could become prominent, to where he could do what we typically associate with becoming prominent is the ability to do things, the ability to make a difference. And so to watch that, and I'll let you share with our audience who possibly has not yet seen the movie, the tagline that they kept referring to throughout the movie, but being able to not just rewrite a narrative to be able to speak it to yourself, but to actually change the situation around you based on your conviction and what you believe about yourself.
I think the phrase, or the quote that you're referring to is, even a pawn can take a king.
Yes.
And that was very apropos for Washington, because that's exactly what he ended up doing. Mm-hmm. He, and it wasn't without heartache, right?
Yeah.
He had major, and these, this is not a historical fiction, right? This is history. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't heard this about George Washington, it's all public record. And if you haven't watched the film, it's great. But I mean, he loses his dad at 12 years old. Yeah. That's a big deal. I have other friends who've lost their dad when they're very young or maybe
And he
before
was
they were
in
born.
school. He was on the path to
Yes.
becoming someone.
Yes. And he had an older half-brother who was educated in England, was part of the king's army, a commissioned officer with hundreds of troops in his command, access to all the parties. But he wasn't a stepbrother. He was a half-brother, but he was a half-brother, the youngest, not educated, not fully educated because he had to leave school when he was young to help with the farm that they were running, and then not commissioned in the
He wasn't able to because he wasn't
seen
born
as
in America.
subject of the king, but not British, not a fully fledged British citizen. Which, if you think about that, I mean, think about being, born in the colonies. You have land, your parents had title, but they don't see you as that because you have all of the negative aspects of being owned by the British Crown as a subject of the king, and yet none of the benefits of being recognized by society because you were simply born on the wrong side of an ocean. And it took just that kind of agitation with his self-image to try to find a way to get some sort of a commission. He ends up volunteering for a militia post, which is not an official paid post. He didn't have the reinforcements. He was set on a suicide mission. He had a fort that was below the water line where it rained. He was put in charge of commanding an army of guys that fought with rakes and sticks and shovels against a very formidable French force with cannons and a whole battery of armament, and he lost, and he had major failures. He was rejected in love. He was rejected by society. He was rejected by birth. He was rejected from the army. He was rejected as a commission. He had men that he loved that he recruited into his militia from the state of Virginia that died on his watch. He started the French and Indian War pretty much single-handedly, which led to taxation of the colonies by the British in order to pay for the war.
Yeah.
So, I mean, talk about a guy who could have just hung his head in shame and ran and hid. And yet, bit by bit, adversity after adversity.
I like what you said about agitation, and the thought came to me that just like a rock has to be tumbled in order to become polished.
Smooth, yeah.
I don't know that articulation can come without agitation.
Ooh,
I think
that's really good.
I think you must
Write
have.
that one down,
I think
ladies
you
and gentlemen.
must have
Articulation.
agitation in order for there to become articulation. Because if you look at it seems like the sadder the story, Van Gogh, C.S. Lewis, J.R. Tolkien, all of the George Washington, all of the moving, most just agitated people have come out with the most beautiful articulation of their feelings. They've come out with the most beautiful articulation of whatever it is that they put their hand to. And the Ferrari ends up becoming the most beautiful, most pristine, most timeless, most, quintessential vehicle through the agitation that Ferrari himself had to go through in order to get to producing this product.
Yeah, he was at Fiat.
Yeah.
Wanted to make a special
engine for Fiat. And there's so many people that run away from agitation because we've just decided to become comfortable, and it's so much better to be comfortable than to get agitated. But I think that what today's podcast really is about is if you really want to have the art to be able to successfully articulate what you want to do and what you want to get out of life, then you better be prepared for and ready to receive the agitation that's going to come along with it.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. And I was thinking about I'm listening to one of the reels, one of the channels that talks about successful businessmen, and the guy that started Comdex, which is a massive consumer electronics trade show. He had failed in something like 24 businesses of his own before he was 52 years old. Then he starts Comdex at 52. And within about 10 or 12 years, sells it for $800 million cash. And he owned the whole thing. Then he buys this little casino in this dirt desert town in the middle of nowhere called the Sands Casino in downtown Las Vegas, which was needed to be retrofitted and was not in good shape. So he destroys that and then builds the Venetian out of it, which he sells for $2 billion.
That's it?
The Venetian?
Yeah.
Well, he sold it, in the 90s.
I mean, $2 billion, in the 90s. I was going to say, like, today's dollars.
That was, now it's probably worth 6 or maybe more.
Yeah.
And he literally he started out, he didn't have a bed. He takes the money from the Venetian and goes over to Asia and builds a gaming business in Asia that's bigger. One of his casinos does more volume than all of the rest of Las Vegas combined. That's how big it was. So here you got the guy that didn't have a bed, builds the single wealthiest, most expensive casino resort hotel in Asia in one lifetime. And that's a testimony to capitalism. And when I say capitalism, I don't mean it as a religion. I mean it as a system of economics that allows people to apply leverage and to continue to go and build and compound their lives.
It allows people to become agitated. Communism, socialism, the whole premise is to be comfortable. The whole premise is if everybody's eating rice.
Take away the right to fail.
Yeah. If everybody's eating rice, everybody's happy. Because everybody has food. And it's most important that everybody gets food. And you're not gonna ever have to feel agitated about your inability to get food. And when I think of the stories, obviously we look at somebody like Elon Musk today and we say, wow, he's been able to so successfully articulate space and cars and all these things. But then I remember hearing you telling me about his, your personal experience of the agitation that he had to go through, staying up all night, eating, 3-day-old Chinese takeout, and
still does it.
He's
been doing that for 35 years.
That is having to face agitation. That is not a state of relaxed, I'm just going to be a bazillionaire and I'm just going to let everybody, bring grapes into my mouth. And that's
not who he is.
No, he has become so acclimated to being agitated that it has articulated
and from that agitation what we found the application of constraint theory at scale. And so I think the thing that keeps him going is the understanding of his connectivity of his own life to this bigger major mission of extending the duration of human consciousness. I mean, people talk about Mars and he's crazy. Maybe he is. But I think
if anybody's going to get us to Mars,
it would be him. And since no human life has ever been outside of our own solar system, our own ecosystem of Earth and Moon, except for the guys that went around the backside of it, which is kind of cool. The goal of being able to extend the life of human consciousness by putting humans on another planet, if this one isn't good enough. Right. I'll leave that for another topic. But I think that goal is worthy. It's worthy of the best you got. And then you take the best you got times all the resources in the freaking planet and success after success after success focused on this laser-focused application of constraint theory. I was on a reel the other day talking about something. And I was talking about internships and how it was Colton Kuhn, Khun, or Kuhn, I think it's Kuhn. Colton Kuhn, Khun, has a great set of reels on habitus and taste. And I made a comment on that. They were talking about how internships are really there to keep people who can't afford to work for free out. And I never looked at it that way, but I think there is some truth to that. And then he was asking for people to comment, and I'm like, well, Yeah, I turned down the opportunity to remain employee number one for Elon and Kimball Musk because I couldn't afford to work for free, because I didn't have the wealth of a supportive family ecosystem. I had a family. I was raised fine, not worried about that. But in my mind, I didn't feel like my dad had my back. And because I didn't feel like my dad had my back, I made an executive decision to discontinue working for Elon and Kimball after I was already in the number one spot for 4 months. Because I couldn't see a path to paying my car insurance and gas and food for 2 or 3 months. I didn't see a way of leaning on my dad to do that because he'd already kicked me out of the house once. And I thought that he basically said, you either have a job or you're in college. Otherwise, you can't live here. So he kicks me out. I get a job. He lets me move back in. And then if I lose that job, in my mind, I'm doing the math, right? I'm doing the math.
Sure.
And it was an emotionally compromised decision. It wasn't the right decision. It potentially cost me tens of millions, if not more money in stock I could have earned just staying with those guys. But it was the best decision I could make under the circumstances. Now, our kids, are still in their mid-20s living at home. I was 20 at the time. And our kids, we've got 6 of our 7 kids are still living at home. We basically said, you got as much runway as you need. We got your back. We'll pay your bills. We'll help you with gas. We'll help you with car insurance. Go do the things that are interesting to you, because we haven't given them tons and tons of money, but we've given enough money to do
We give the opportunity to do the internships.
Yeah, we give him the opportunity to do the internships. And as a result, Jeffrey does an internship at 15 that ends up putting him on national TV before he's 18 years old. Or maybe he was 18, just 18 when he filmed, and is now, second line manager at a big box store, living in the town that he wants to live in and getting married to the gal he wants to get married to. And Joseph was able to take 2 gap years off and go sell windows and doors and make $100,000 a year and party like a rock star while he was in the process of finishing university. And Madeline's doing her work in with the TikTok reels. We've got our podcast. Together. You've got your business together. All of those things. I think there's a lot of value in doing something that you're interested in without having to worry for a season about making it make a profit, because you're going to get better. And you do anything that you're interested in long enough, you're going to get better at it. And if you get better at doing something, you're going to learn. If you learn, you actually get better at learning. You get better at observing, because you start to see past the basics into the nuances that differentiate new, different, better for people's businesses. And any business, I don't care if it's a dry cleaner. We had the Korean dry cleaner right down the street. Those guys ran that dry cleaner for 10 years, 15 years. We took all their stuff to them. They were the best. My stuff was always done.
I think it was like best cleaner.
It was like best. It was like best. Yeah, but they were the best.
They were the best.
They were so good. And then they were finally COVID. Everybody raised the rates during COVID, and their lease was up, and they're like,
pay the rent,
we can't pay the rent. We've been in business 20 years. We're busy as we can be. We work 7 days a week, and if we stay in business, we cannot pay the rent that they want because they had tripled it. And so they left, and now I have nowhere to take my drive. I mean, there's other people to take it to, but our community lost an A player at something that is so basic that you almost never even think about it. And the other 2 or 3 times that I've taken my clothes to dry cleaners, their shirts are ruined from bleach spills, buttons are missing. I mean, just shit is just not done right. The shirts have not ended up right, and iron in melted collar stays that permanently warp the collars on the shirts. It's like, guys, but at the same time, world class is what it is for a reason. It's the little intricacies and nuances that allow people to operate at a world class level over time. Folks, thanks so much for being with us today on the Jeff Heilman Project. We're grateful for every audience participant, for every comment, for every like, for every subscribe. We are a small mom and pop shop here in our town in California, here in San Jose. And also, I want to shout out to Andrew, our producer, who has been posting reels every day, 5 days a week for probably 2.5, almost 3 years now. We had our first reel go to 100,000 views on a reel.
And it's still going because y'all are still
going because you guys are looking. So Andrew will leave a link in the description below for this episode for the reel that's getting 100,000 plus views. We're not trying to make money on this, folks. We're trying to do something that creates an archive for our children that they can remember who their parents and hopefully when our grandkids come along, grandparents are now, who we were into the future. And we hope that you enjoy tuning in and tagging along with us as we have these weekly discussions as husband and wife on the Jeff Heileman Project. So thanks for being with us, everybody. Have a great weekend.
God bless.
See ya.
See ya.